let's go ahead and get started. I don't want to cancel that. So a good place to start with, let's go ahead and make a new file. Classroom, ITP, file reading, and lists.py. All right, so a good way to start talking about file read. So we've talked about file reading in the past. So what we're going to do today is see how that ties into the concept of lists and strings. Okay? So, and we're going to learn how to convert lists into strings and strings into lists in ways that actually make sense as a result. Okay? So, and then we're going to be dealing with lists of strings in ways that make sense. And finally, we're going to be hitting situations where nested for loops don't feel contrived, right? Where they can actually be used to do something useful. So let me go ahead and start by writing, by creating a new file called for data. And you'll want to write this down. And you'll want to put it in the same directory. If you're going to be following my directions, you'll want to put it in the same directory. And I'm just going to call this numbers.csv. Right? So who knows what a CSV file is? Any takers on this one? Yes. Comma separated values was the answer. Yes. You win $0. Sorry, I can't hand out. Actually, I don't know. Am I allowed to hand out money to students? I have no idea. Okay, so comma separated values. Now CSV files are interesting because they're kind of like precursors to Excel files. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a bunch of values that are separated by commas. So let's go ahead and see. So let's go ahead and see. Name. Let's see. Let's go ahead and see. Name. Exam 1. Exam 2. All right, and then, so I'm basically making a table here. Name, exam 1, exam 2. And I'm just going to use Alice, Bob, and then just other generic names that are used in computer science. So if your name matches, I'm not trying to leak your information to the entire class or something like that. I'm just trying to make up names that are A, B, C, D in order. And, so I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and make it further, and I'm just going to leave it as a 1 through 5 scale. Right, so 3 and 2, right? So comma separated values, let's go ahead and see them, are basically, I'm making a very basic table over here. Okay. So Alice, exam, and the spaces may or may not matter. It just really depends. So Alice 3, 2, Bob 1, 5, Cindy 3, 2, Dan 4, 3, and let's go ahead and see Eva 5 and 5, right? So what I've got here is a file, and I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now I'm going to go ahead and look for it in my file browser. So let's go ahead and see Classroom. Let's go ahead. Okay. And now if you were to go and open it up, notice that it's not a Python file or a text file like this. It opens up in an Excel shaped file, right? If you go ahead and created this file, this will open in LibreOffice's Sheets, and it says, hey, this is comma separated value files. How are stuff separated? And you can say, well, it's separated by commas. And look, it already imported it, and it's importing it, and it has turned it into a table, right? So you can take so long as the stuff you're dealing with can be represented as strings, you can take any Excel file and export it as a CSV file, right? If it's got graphs and stuff in that, then not so much. But if all the information is being displayed as a string, you can export it as a CSV file, right? You can just do that by going as with let's see, export, no, just a save as would do it. Save as, and then you could say and then you could select CSV from over here, right? Because there's like a million options and you're never sure which to choose. But CSV is special because it's a text file, meaning that I can read it pretty easily with a programming language, as opposed to an Excel file, which is a binary file. So great, let's go ahead and read this file, right? So I'm going to start off with a if. So now I'm going to show you the way that this works. If name equals underscore, wait, what am I doing? Let's just go ahead and say this. So I'm just going to test. Hello. You are running this file. Run it, and it says, hello, you are running this file. So this is the way a main function actually looks in Python, and I didn't want to introduce it too soon because it looks like this weird thing. And the reason being is that, we have a bunch of, now the reason, let's go ahead and just show this over here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create a fake, just a function over here, spam, which will print out spam. And then we're going to print hello. Okay. So I'm just opening up another Python file. Okay. Actually, let's go ahead and I got to make it now. Save as. So here I'm just teaching some various things about the language. So this is just some various features about the language that I want to get out of the way. Import example. Now none of this will really be you'll never really be tested on this one, but this is just so you can read some of the upcoming examples that I give you, okay? And not be completely confused about it, right? I don't want it to be magic. So if I say import file reading and lists, which is the name of the Python file I just wrote, print done over here, right? It will first import file reading and list and then print out done, right? So it printed hello and done. Why did it print out hello? Well, the reason is because when you import something, it says, okay, I'm going to read the Python file that you just did, and I'm going to run through it like it's a Python program. Okay? So I read and I register a method called spam, and it says to print out hello. Now the final thing over here is this if name equals main, which is just special magic, which says if the name of this program internally is the main program. In other words, this is the file that I am currently running, right? This is special magic over here. It's perfectly fine if you don't understand why there's two underscores there. It's perfectly fine. But what this is saying is that if I'm running this file, this hello, you are running this file comes up. Otherwise, if I am importing it here, it'll print out hello and done. It won't run the hello, you are running this because it's not the main program being run. It's being imported. That makes sense? So when you import this file, this won't be run. But when you're actually like executing this file and running it as though it's its own program, you can. And this is just useful for like keeping things organized. But for right now, just realize this is how I'm going to start my programs from now on. Okay? So let's go ahead and open up our file. Okay? So open numbers.csv. Okay? and then we're going to read it, and then we're going to open it with read access. Okay, that's how we open a file, and I'm going to say this is my data is equal to open.csv. Okay, now there's multiple ways to read a file, and I'm going to go through them one at a time. The first is to use a for loop, for line in data. Okay, now first let's print out data to see what it is. Print data. For line in data, print line. So we run this, it's fairly straightforward. It's going to print out that data is an IO text wrapper with the name number CSV, mode is reading it, and it's using UTF-8 encoding, so modern Unicode encoding. Okay? In other words, it's a bunch of gibberish you don't need to really understand. But it's just saying that this is like a object. This is the representation of file. And then so for line in the data, that's pretty intuitive. For each line in the data, in the file that we're reading, I print out the first line, the second line, the third line, the fourth line. Now, why is there an extra space in between there? It's an interesting question, and the reason is because in this file, I have name, exam1, exam2, and then I hit the enter key. So it prints out that new line that I put in the file, and then it puts a new line on the end of that. So it's just printing out literally what I have. All right. I think there's a method, though, that's pretty useful here. I think it's called trim. Let's go ahead and see. Does that work? Let's see. So let's go to common string method, shall we? Can never really remember what they're called. String. Common string operations, right? So notice that I do look stuff up often. This is not because like I don't know anything. It's just because I have a list of the stuff that's usually useful, and I know what kind of stuff that is useful to look up. Looking up stuff is great. Okay? Which is why I like having my exams, have a cheat sheet. So, I think I remember now what it is. I think it's strip. Strip. Okay? Yeah, I think it's strip. So now if I do strip, and what strip does is that it removes all beginning and ending white space. So if I were to add a bunch of white space right over here, right at the beginning, white space being, of course, space that's just white, like tabs and spaces and stuff, and new lines. So this says get rid of all the beginning and ending spaces in that. So run. Oh, I can't run a CSV file. So there we go. Open it, run it, and notice that the beginning space does not appear, and I'm no longer printing out the new lines at the end of the file. That's because what I'm doing is that I am, for every line that I'm reading, I am stripping it. I am printing out, or rather, I'm printing out the string I would get if I stripped it, which is that I'm removing the beginning and ending white space. Okay, so that's one way to read my data. Okay, another way to do it, though, is that I can, so this, let's call it, so let's call this technique 1, open file and read line by line. Now, neither of these methods I'd say is necessarily better or worse. The disadvantage of this method is that once I go through a file like this once, I can't iterate it over it a second time, right? I go to the end of the file. I can't read anymore, so I can't do the for line in data unless I open up the file again. Okay. Then let's look at technique 2, which is that I want to store my lines. So open numbers.csv. Oops. And we want it to have read access. And then we say read lines. Okay, so notice the difference over here is that it's lines. It could be any variable, but I'm calling it lines. Where I open it, and then I open it the same way, but now I have a dot read lines over here. Okay? And let's go ahead and just see, right? We printed out data, and it came out with basically a gibberish object. So let's go ahead and see what we get when we print lines. It's a list. It's a list of strings. And here's the first line with all the spaces in it, right? And then a comma to say that's the end of the first line. Then all the stuff in the second line, and then all the stuff in the third line, and then all the stuff in the fourth line, all the stuff in the fifth line, and all the stuff in the sixth line. So read lines basically takes this file over here and says we're going to turn each line into a string and store each string in a single list. So it's one list that makes up all the files, right? So if I wanted to print out just the first line, I could print lines 0, and that would print out the first line. If I wanted the second line, or I could line at index 2, Bob 1 5, right? 0. And again, I can strip this line so that I get rid of all the extraneous data. I really like stripping lines of data or stripping lines of the beginning and end, especially if I'm going through text. It helps format it, right? So now we don't have the leading space on it anymore. Okay? Now the useful thing about this is that now I've got it stored in a list. So now I can go over it again. So let's just go ahead and recreate what we were doing, which was for line in lines. So for the singular and the plural, that's something I like doing a whole lot. So for each individual line in the lines. And if you don't like that, then don't use it. For me, it makes sense. So for each line in lines, print line.strip. And there we get kind of the same output, right? And this stripped out the new line that was put in each line of the CSV file. So let's call this technique 2. To open with read lines and store in list. All right. Those are the two I don't see the need to overburden you with any other techniques, right? I feel those are perfectly sufficient. All right. So let's go ahead and now make an objective, okay? Which is, let's go ahead and I'm going to remove all these leading spaces first. What I want to do is I'd like to get the average score for for this made-up class of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students. Okay, I'd like to get the average score on exam 1. Okay, so I need to average together 3, 1, 3, 4, 5, which isn't so hard, right? If I've got that isn't so hard for 5 students. But say this was 200, and now it's very nice to have a program to do that. All right, so let's go ahead and see how we want to do that. All right, so today's up. So let's go ahead and let me go ahead and just comment one more thing. Today's big lesson are file reading, which we just did. 2, let's see, what should I say the other one is? Oh yeah, split. Splitting a string into a list with split. All right, so we're going to obviously go over the dot split method. So let's go ahead and I'm going to reproduce what I did for technique 2 because I find that to be a bit more manageable, right? So we want to compute the average. Okay, compute average of exam 1, right? I'm just going to put that below there because we're probably going to use the lines a whole lot. So open numbers.csv. Okay, remember it's the string. If you can't find the file, it's because you probably misspelled the file name or it's not in the same directory. Okay? Let's go ahead and open it with read access. All right. Now compute the average of exam 1. So what we need to do is that we have to go through each line. Oh, yep, for line in, well, we need to go through every line, but there's one line we don't really care about. What's that line? The first one. Don't really care about the first one because it gives me my header data, right? That's just for the user to read. So what I'm going to do, oh, sorry, forgot read lines over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say lines is equal to lines 1 colon to the end. What does that do? That essentially takes lines and it throws out the very first line, right? It takes out the name, it takes out that first line. So what I'm going to, if I were to run this, for line in lines, print line, this will print out, this will go ahead and print out just the data. Okay. Everybody see that? Just print out the data. It doesn't print out that first line because this line got rid of the first line. Right? I sliced it off. All right. So now we actually got to work on computing the average. So we need a running sum. So I'll create a total is equal to 0 and num students equal to 0. Right? So 2 running sums. So now what we have to do is get this number and then 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 get this number. So let's brainstorm some strategies to do that. Okay? First instinct might be like, okay, we need to look for the thing after the first comma. That's a pain, isn't it? Right? Right? So what I would have to do is that I'd have to use the find function of a string, which is something that exists, that gives me the index of the first comma, and then I'd have to say get the character that's after that. So get it at I+1. That's a pain. It sounds like a pain. Especially if, we decide to make these, more than one digit. The grades are more than one digit, right? Then I'd have to grab multiple characters, and I wouldn't know where the second comma is unless I used another find function. That's a pain, right? So you could do it without the split method, but the split method, as we'll see, makes things a whole lot easier. So let's go ahead and see what the split method does. So I'm going to say for line in lines, line is equal to line dot strip. So first, I'm just going to get rid of all any that new line that comes after it because that's annoying, right? Just practice on my part. And then what I'm going to say is line. So I'm going to print the line right now. And then I'm going to say line is equal to line dot split. And then notice it comes up with these suggestions: a pattern, a string, a maximum split, and flags. All we have to worry about is the pattern, which we'll learn gets actually very powerful later on, but I'm just going to put comma there. And now let's print out line and see what happens as a result. Okay? So we're going to print out the line after stripping it and then after splitting it. Alice. So this is after stripping, and this is after splitting on a comma. This is after, and this is Bob after stripping and after splitting on a comma. So what does the split function do? You can kind of see what it does, right? It split it up into a list, but it's a bit hard to describe how it does it. What it does is that it takes in what we call a token, and it looks for that token. In this case, it's a comma, and says, okay, this string actually needs to be multiple strings. How do you want to split it up? I'd like to split it up along commas. If, for example, I decided to split it off the letter I, which is weird, but I could totally do that. What I'd get is Alice 3-2 and then Al 3-2. And notice that this is one string, right? So one string over here, one string over here. So this is 2 strings total. Bob is one string, is a list holding one string. D is these 2 strings, right? C and then Ndi over here, right? Notice also that the I is missing. The split looks at it and says the I is the character that we're dividing on. It's like a space. So I'm breaking it there. You're rarely going to be splitting off a letter. Typically, you're going to be splitting off a comma. And so over here, we've removed the commas and we have Alice, then 3, and then 2. These commas are not the commas that got removed. These are commas that show you what's a member of the what is in the list. So these are commas that are showing you these are different elements in the list. Now the useful thing about this, so how does this help us? Well, we see if that we split it, it's kind of become the cells of our Excel spreadsheet, right? Index 0 is the name, index 1 is exam 1, and index 2 is exam 2. Make sense? So now I can extract that. I can go exam 1. So I can say grade is equal to line index 1. Print grade. Three, 2, Alice, and then 3. Bob, 1. Cindy, 3. Dan, 4. Eva, 5. Okay. Although now that I notice, although I did notice a while back, this is a string over here, right? And if I'm going to be adding things together, then I probably want to turn it into an int. So turn that into an integer. So there we go. So now this is an integer. And so now we can add them up. Grade is equal to the line. Total. So now we can add up the grades. Total is equal to grade plus, total is equal to total plus grade. And num students is equal to num students plus 1. Right? Increment the number of students we've seen by 1 and increase the grade by that student's grade. Then what we can do is we can print the average by just saying it's the total divided by the number of students. Right, so 3, 1, 3, 4, 5 gives you, adding those together and dividing by 5, gives you an average of 3.2. So this is a particularly powerful operation, the split operator. It allows you to split things apart. So I can take anything that, so I can take stuff separated by commas. I can also and split them up. But that's not all. Let's take a look at what else I can do with the split operator. Python 3. Okay? What I can do over here is I can say, hello world, how are you today? Question mark. And I can store that as and then let me go ahead and store that as string s. Okay? If I say s.split and don't give it any parameters, it's going to assume that it wants me to split on white space. So here it's split into hello world, how are you today? Right? Split it up by the spaces. So that's pretty nice, right? So let's go ahead and just say, I'll say that's s is equal to s.split. So now we've stored it back. So how do we, so there's the split operation. And this will be used a whole lot less, but I want to introduce it now because it is the inverse, but we're going to see more of this later. The inverse of split is join. So here's the join operator. Empty string, join, s. Well, kind of like that. Hello, comma, world, how are you today? It says take the entire list, take the list s and join all the strings together using an empty string. Or use an empty string to join everything in s together. Another way to put that. If I were to instead put a dash here, it would say, let's take a dash and use it to join everything in s together. Hello, world, how are you today? Right? If I were to instead put in space, it would join them together using a space. So you can use split to split stuff into a string. Split a string into a list, and you can use join to take it and put it back. But we'd use the split operator a whole lot more. Let's go ahead and take a look at writing maybe another kind of thing. Let's go at what?
I would just say on that last line of the one you set up, what's an S?
What's an S?
There we go.
Oh yeah, what is an S?
Put it back together, but it didn't put it together.
Yeah. It put it back together, but right, I didn't store it anywhere, right? So it gave me a new string that's basically is merged together. If I want to store it, I'd have to put it in like finish is equal to that, and then print out finish. All right. So I really want to do one more example on this of a bunch of numbers, but I'm lazy about writing a bunch of numbers, but that's okay. So let's talk about file writing in Python, okay? Which will be used a whole lot less, but I'm lazy about coming up with a lot of numbers, so I want to write a bunch. So new Python file writing .py. So how does this work? If name equals underscore main. All right. So the way you write a file is you declare that you would like to open it. Okay? Data is equal to open, and then we write where we'd like to put our data in. Okay? So let's go ahead and say let's call it data.csv. Okay? I'd like to put it there, and then we will use a W to write it. Okay? So how do I write some data in there? I would say data.write hello, and then new line. And that's almost everything. So run it. There were no errors. Let's go ahead and take a look. Is there another file in here? No, there is not. That's because you need one more step when you're writing a file. You need one more step that you don't need to do when you're reading a file, which is that I have to say data.close, which lets the computer know that I'm done writing the file. So I run it, and now I check my data. Sorry, check this over here, and up. Where is that? I saw it move. Did I put you? Oh, I put you in the wrong directory. So let's go ahead and save you into classroom, ITP, file writing, boom, run you again, right? And it will put that file in the folder over here. So if we open this, right, it'll just have hello in there, right? So we wrote out a file, right, super exciting. If I say data.write hello spam eggs, notice that I'm putting in the new line, by the way. Let's go ahead and see after writing that. Let's go ahead and open it in here, data.csv. It says hello spam eggs. So it does, and then it has a fourth line over here that was empty because I told it to put a new line. So when you write something, it won't create a new line unless you have that over there, unless you have a new line figure. Now, now again, the entire reason I'm doing this is because I'm lazy, not because it's necessary and it's easier to do this, rather than, hammering out a bunch of stuff. This is not necessarily, again, something you'll be doing right now, but when your second exam comes along, you'll probably be reading some numbers and then writing some other numbers back. So let's go ahead and create some numbers, right? So import random, right? And so num. So let's go ahead and make this. Let's go ahead and put together a file, some information. So data.write. So let's see, random.randint, I believe. And if I give it 1,000, let's see what happens. Randint two purposes. Oh, right, 0 to 1,000. Got to give it 2 arguments. That'll give me a new number between 0 and 1,000. Right argument must be a string, not an integer. Grr. Right, so it needs to take in a string, so I'm just going to turn that number into a string. There, let's go ahead and open data. It says, hey, reload. So hello spam egg 605. If I write it again, my file is now hello spam eggs 990. Now note that it is overwriting the file. Right? It is overwriting the file whenever I'm writing this. So if I'm doing open.csv write, it's just overwriting the file. It's just completely, taking that file, throwing out what was there, and putting the new data in. Okay? If you want, so there's 2 write modes. Write is, it assumes you want a new file, a clean slate. This is the default assumption. The other thing you can do is A mode, which is append, which the file already exists, and what it will do is that it will append everything to the end of it. But we're going to stick with write mode. So the entire point of me doing this is that I would really, really, really like to generate a CSV file with a bunch of numbers. Right? So what I'll do is that I will copy this line, this created random integer between 0 and 1,000, and then I'm going to concatenate it with a comma. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and going to actually take this, copy this, concatenate, okay, and then plus that, and plus that. So now I've got 3 numbers. So random number, comma, random number, comma, random number, okay? Oh, and then let's do one more thing we need at the end, a plus /n. So I've just simply added 3 random numbers together and then concatenated a /n at the end. Okay. And then, what if I run this now, this is what data will look like. 3 random numbers, and then go on to the next line. But, let's say, but honestly, that's kind of one that just gets me 3 numbers. So, entire reason I do this is I want a lot. So let's do a for loop for blank in range 1,000. Let's write 1,000 lines and just dump data onto my computer. That didn't take long at all. Reload. Boom. Look how quickly it just generated that data. Okay. By the way, if the more security conscious of you are just thinking, wait a second, I could hurt a computer with this. Yes, you can. You can totally just like eat up all, the person's memory, right? Took 100,000 there, 100,000 lines of this data now been generated. Okay, and there we go. 100,000 lines of random numbers. Cool. So let's go ahead and open that up. We'll go ahead and work in the same file we were working in previously. What we're gonna do is that we're just simply going to sum up every single number in here. Okay, so data is equal to open data.csv, and here I'm opening it in read mode. For line in, let's go ahead and say I'm going to reuse total, saying it's a 0. For line in data. So again, the data is split up, I want to add up all the numbers. So it's number, comma, number, comma. So obviously I want to split across. I want to use split again. Okay, number, comma, number, comma. So data. So line is equal to line dot split on a comma. Line. And then total is equal to total. So total is equal to total. Well, actually, let's go ahead and do this a bit easier. X is equal to, so now we've got 3 numbers essentially, right? We've got the first number, second number, third number, except they're strings right now. So X is equal to int line first index, right? Because this is going to be a string. Remember that, everybody? This is going to be a string. This is going to be a string. Since it's taking a string and splitting it into a list of strings. So we're going to say X, Y, and Z. So Y, oops, X, Y, Z, 0, 1, 2, great. And now total is equal to total plus X plus Y plus Z. Print total, and we should get an error, I think, but let's go ahead and run it. Boom. Oh, no, we're good. So it says the total of all the random numbers we just generated was, let's see, 150,100,976. Right? And it just, it outputted those numbers pretty quickly, and it read them and totaled them up even quicker, which is pretty cool. Right? So so you can kind of see the data processing applications right here, which is that you can kind of really automate a lot of stuff there. All right, so we have about a bit more than a half an hour left. So let's take a look at doing a couple more exercises. So there is a Dropbox today. We're going to be working off the same exercises from last Wednesday. Okay, there's a Dropbox available, unlike last time where I totally forgot to put one up, I think. Might have been my other class I forgot to do that. Let's go ahead and just take a look. Oh, I can just open it in here. Teaching. So let's take a look at our list exercises. All right. Now, if you've tried them, 4 is actually fairly trivial. So let's go ahead and try this one. Number 5. So again, you can work with people next to you. Round all up. We want to create a function called round all up, which takes in a list of floats and returns a new list of integers. Okay, everybody got that? It's a new list, right? You're creating a new list. You're not replacing the old list. The old list should be unchanged. This returned list contains all the numbers from the original list, but rounded up. Below are some input-output pairs. 1.0, 3.5, 3.2, 4.1, right? So 3.5 got rounded up to 4, 3.2 got rounded up to 4, right? Because specifically what we're doing is that we're rounding up, right? Right? 1.0 doesn't get rounded up because there's nothing to round up there, okay? So remember, to add an item to an end of a list, you use the append function. Look up how to round numbers in Python, which is a good indication that I haven't taught this how to round numbers in class because it's an edge thing. So you should totally just like throw into your favorite search engine, how do I round numbers up in Python? And then not necessarily blindly copy the results, but read the results and say, oh, that's the function I need. All right, so you can go ahead and get started on that one. And then we'll look at and then we'll see where we stand for time.